Evolve Beyond Borders is proud to introduce Brent Skinner, co-founder, director, and principal analyst at 360 Insights. Brent is an accomplished subject matter expert in human capital management with over 15 years of experience. He is also the host of the #HR Tech Chat video podcast. Please welcome Brent as he shares his insights on EOR, moving from why to how.
Thank you for having me here. And Niamo, this has been a wonderful event. I've been really looking forward to it. And looking forward to speaking with you all today around EOR, moving from why to how. And hopefully I'll be able to give you some inkling of that moving from why to how, hopefully. First of all, just a little bit, super quick about myself and us at 360 Insights. Myself, I've been in many swim lanes of the HCM space for, going on 17 years now. That's a scary thought. One thing I've never been is a practitioner, but I've been a journalist in the space. I've been on the vendor side a couple times, and this is my second time as an analyst, and it's industry analyst in the space. So I've been observing it from many angles. I've seen how the sausage is made, and I've seen a lot of the evolution in this space as well. 360 Insights, we're a boutique analyst firm. Just like any other boutique analyst firm or some of the larger firms as well, we have our own lens, our own take on how we look at the at enterprise software, and HCM being the practice area that I lead there as a co-founder of 360 Insights. But we're very keen on learning about as much as we can about the evolving decision-making process in enterprise software and in buying it and in selling it. It's changed a lot over the past 15 years. Some of this is old hat, but worth repeating. IT used to drive the bus, excuse me. I say run and drive it, drive the bus. They're still involved, but often just peripherally. Sometimes they're still driving it, but oftentimes they're even kind of on the sidelines. There's a lot of other stakeholders who are involved instead or as well. You have the CFO, you have the line of business manager. You have the CEO sometimes, depending on the size of the firm. We've seen chief operations officers involved in HCM plays because perhaps it involves frontline workers. And we've seen employee experience councils involved in the decision-making process. And in fact, we published a report around this called Anatomy of Decision that looks at what were the drivers that led the buying organization to decide, to realize it needed to change. And why did they look at vendors A, B, C, and D? Why did they choose vendor A over the others? And how did that point person, the person, the champion, internal champion on the prospect or at the prospect organization, how do they reconcile and bring together all those conflicting interests and all those stakeholders internally to reach the decision and make things move forward? So that's what we're all about. So today our agenda for this particular presentation is just to run through it very quickly here. What is an employer of record? And I think we have a good idea of what that is already, but I'm going to give you my own take, or just add a fine point to that, if you will. Why is the EOR model crucial? What is your awareness level? Right? Where are we collectively in awareness when it comes to EOR? Why would you turn to an EOR? What are concrete and abstract HCM? Whoa, what does that mean? Well, that's a way we look at HCM at 360 Insights, and you'll see the connection with EORs. It's pretty interesting. I hope you find it as intriguing as I do. How do EORs support both concrete and abstract HCM? And how can EORs be most effective? And those are some of my views on the how. So, what is an employer of record? Well, very quickly, if I were to put it as simply as possible, and this doesn't necessarily capture the whole thing, but if you wanted to say it in a simple sentence, let's say if I can actually say it in a sentence, an EOR enables an organization to stand up a presence very quickly in a region or country that is new to them to hire and employ people legally. There's a lot of cost associated with doing that yourself as an organization, prohibitive to your global agility, if you will, right? And there's a lot of compliance risk associated with hiring and employing people in all sorts of different regions of the world where the regulatory landscape varies widely and wildly, I'd say. And so an EOR is a very good option for an organization that wants to be able to hire the very best talent anywhere very quickly without having that sort of that ability natively internally to do it. And it's also the tip of, it also kind of creates the tip of the spear for your employer brand, if you will, and we're going to get into that a little bit too. So you want to have a very buttoned down, orderly way to do that, and the best bet is to outsource that to an EOR so that you can protect your employer brand. We'll get into that a little bit too. Why is the EOR model crucial? Well, first I want to talk about some of the directions in the data here. The direction remains the same. There are a lot of trends that were moving in a certain direction inexorably before the pandemic hit us, and then the pandemic accelerated these. Work from home, and work from home has become work from anywhere. You have the sort of the perennial drive to expand globally for all sorts of companies, big and small, right? And that data, there's some data that's been coming out very recently that seems to suggest that some of this movement into remote work or work from anywhere might be slowing down a little bit, but really it's just a slowdown from a fever pitch that we reached with the pandemic. So for instance, and a lot of this data is from Gallup. Some of it is from 2022 Equinix Global Tech Report. Another one is from a 2021 State of Remote Work report by Owl Labs. But first off, we have 33% of businesses plan to expand into a new country, 38% into a new region entirely in 2023. Okay, so that's taking into account all of the swirling sort of quasi-black clouds, we call them gray clouds, around economic conditions and whatnot, right? They're still planning these expansions. That's a driver for EORs right there, isn't it? We have 56% of U.S. workers, more than 70 million people. Wow. I want to put my pinky up like Dr. Evil in the old movies. Have remote capable jobs. So their jobs could easily be remote jobs. And that's a big deal. That's a big deal. We also have growth in remote work was 140% through the years 2005 through 2020. So I don't know if you're aware, but those were the 15 years preceding the pandemic. All right, so it was already moving in that direction. And of course, we had the explosion in remote work out of necessity with the pandemic. And some of you may have seen a LinkedIn study that came out in the last couple of weeks that suggested that remote work is slowing down considerably. I don't know if I necessarily believe those numbers, and I might be biased, but in any event, you have to remember that it's been moving in that direction very, indefatigably, just undeniably for many, many years. And even if there's a slowdown, you're still moving in that direction. So remote work is not going away. And then also you have aspiring digital nomads. Those folks that want to work from anywhere. 84% of job candidates are interested or very interested in work from anywhere, WFA, all right? So those are sort of the macro trends. The global EOR market is growing quickly, all right? Oh, sorry, I guess that's overlapping a little bit. Sorry about that. But in any event, depending on where you look, it's anywhere between 6 and 7% on the high end there of CAGR through the next several years. And it makes sense, given the data that we saw on the previous slide. EOR is growing. It's here to stay. So what is your awareness level? Oops, I messed up the animation there. Forgive me. There's this thing called the innovation adoption curve. It's for the buying of technology. And I found an interesting analogy here with where we are with EOR. There's this idea that there are innovators. These are the people maybe who have actually invented the new technology and the very, very first adopters of it. And then you have, it's sort of a phase that people go through where the population eventually all adopts a new technology. Then you have your early adopters. These are the people in 2005 who couldn't stop talking about their iPhones, for instance, right? Then you have the early majority, is that early big wave after the very first people. And then you have your late majority, and then you have your laggards, like my father, who finally got rid of his 3G phone a couple years ago and has the cheapest smartphone available and only uses it for certain things. He's actually tech savvy, but he doesn't do Facebook Messenger on his phone, but he does on his computer. He's a power user of Facebook Messenger on his computer. Anyway, what is our awareness level today in terms of EOR? I would say collectively, if we would kind of stretch this concept a little bit, I would say we're collectively in the early majority stage, maybe, if I were to kind of eyeball it, right? Why would you turn to an EOR? Well, the most obvious reason is the nuts and bolts of it. You need to be compliant everywhere that you are hiring somebody, and to satisfy those global agility needs where you have to go wherever you can to find the best talent and employ them there where they are, meet them where they are for work from anywhere or anything else. That's a very expensive proposition if you want to do it natively with your organization. And so it's much more preferable to do it through an EOR. And sometimes it's the only real possible option. So you have compliance, but you also have all these sort of the nuts and bolts of employing people, what I like to call the things. You can employ people poorly, but you having these things in place, but you literally cannot employ people without these things in place if you follow, right? So you have your compensation, payroll tax, PTO. I won't go through the whole thing. Some of this is particular to global regions, and some of it is just, the nuts and bolts of HR, right? So you need that EOR to handle that for you and to mitigate that risk for yourself because they're taking it on themselves. But I want to challenge you here. You need an EOR for even more. So this is our opportunity to sit in front of the still water, the proverbial body of water there, and just meditate, I would say, in some of the greater charters of HR or of hiring organizations, if you will. You have this need to bolster the employee experience at all times. You have this need to protect the employer culture, and you need to attract top talent. So we're going to take just a quick detour here. And I'm going to share with you how we look at HCM here at 360 Insights, and you'll see how this fits into the EOR model and all of that. And there's a greater charter here, I think. So HCM has two hemispheres, if you will, or HR has two directives. One is concrete, and one is abstract. Concrete HR is all that efficiency-related stuff, all the nuts and bolts of HR, everything that needs to be done, has to be done in order to employ people. You have to pay them on time. You have to track their time correctly. You need a scheduling software that can actually create a schedule, these sorts of things. I won't go through the whole list, but that's concrete HCM. It's all about finding efficiencies. It's all about lessening the administrative load. You want to get as tight as possible with that stuff. But then there's the other side of HR, which is really interesting. It's the abstract HR, HCM. And every one of these areas of concrete HCM also has sort of there's two sides of the same coin where you have the abstract part. Abstract from a higher level is protecting employee sentiment, supporting employee sentiment, protecting the employee experience, and building that a positive employer brand. Well, you look at processing payroll on time, arguably the most concrete aspect of HR, right? Of employing people. If you don't pay them on time, you've failed from an administrative perspective, right? But you've also created a real problem for yourself, a dangerous, urgent situation where employee sentiment may drop precipitously. I think it's something like half of employees will look for a new job or after tolerating just one mistake in payroll. So you have a huge employer brand reputation problem for yourself right away. And that has implications for attracting and retaining talent and everything else. And I won't go through all of these because we have a certain amount of time for this presentation, but if you think about every single one of these, every single aspect of the HCM process has a concrete and an abstract side to it, using our power lens at 360 Insights. So one other way of thinking about abstract and concrete HCM, and this will tie in back with EOR, I promise you, is there was a fellow, is this working? Huh. Oh, here we are, okay. Henry Maslow, back in the 1940s, I forget whether it was Yale or Harvard, but either one, Ivy League school, he came up with this idea of the human experience or human motivation. He called it Maslow's hierarchy of needs, or somebody else called it Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the idea is that we solve for the basic things first, but we have other needs that we eventually build up to that we solve for as well. So you have your physiological needs. Think caveman days. That's the easiest way to think about this. You're solving, you have to find food to eat and water to drink, all right? Then you have your safety, your shelter. You need to protect yourself from the animals that you are sometimes killing to eat, and obviously you're eating vegetables too, even though it's caveman days. You have love and belonging, right? You finally solve for those two basic things, right? And now you can start thinking about belonging and interrelationships and these sorts of things. Just as a side note, they've done some observations with infants. Actually, infants need love and love as well, or they don't grow, and it's weird. So I wonder if maybe if we did Maslow's hierarchy of needs today, we might amend it a little bit. But in any event, you're moving up the scale, and then you have esteem and self-actualization. So you're starting to think about yourself and feeling good about yourself, and then finally doing what you really want to do because you have all the basics out of the way. And of course, it moves upward. So very quickly. So on the left, you see Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Now think about the world of work, right? You have these different things. In my opinion, there's an overlay here. Physiological, time and attendance, payroll, the very basics of employment. Moving up the scale, regulatory compliance, I would say that roughly equates to safety. You have engaged employees, love and belonging, job satisfaction, esteem, career mobility, attractive employer culture, self-actualization. So there's sort of a Venn diagram here with abstract and concrete overlapping a bit, where you get more abstract as you move up, less abstract, more concrete as you are closer to the bottom. How can EORs be most effective? Well, you think about this. You're not only ensuring that you can employ people legally and quickly in new regions, but you're also protecting the employee experience. That's the tip of the spear. The EOR is the tip of the spear. When someone is newly hired, you need the right kind of partner there who's going to make it as easy as possible for you to present a very positive experience to those new employees. Because there are some studies out there, I don't know the actual numbers, but there are studies out there that say onboarding has the biggest impact on an employee's impression of your organization. So the first thing you should do when you're looking at EOR is you should select, is my opinion, you should select an EOR with native technology to handle the things that an EOR does. There's a prevalent model out there in the EOR space. It's called the aggregate contractor model for technology. And the EOR will have its own user interface that it provides for users, and it's the UX, and it gives the impression of a unified sort of solution, but behind all of that is just a slew of different technologies feeding into it. It might be a local payroll provider technology, all sorts of different things. And so there's a veneer of it being a single system, but behind the scenes, it's a bunch of different technologies cobbled together. That is huge. And not for naught, and I know we're at an EAMO event, but I will say that the global payroll hyperloop is a great example of that native technology for EOR. In my opinion, that's a game changer when it comes to EOR. Oh, did I move? Sorry. That's a game changer when it comes to EOR, being able to provide that single technological experience. And it also enables the organization. We heard during the podcast episode just a few minutes ago, this idea that you want to have data. You can have that global payroll data at your disposal. By the way, global payroll being the biggest. Payroll, not global payroll. Payroll being the biggest piece of EOR. There's a lot of really there's a rich trove of data in payroll, and if you can somehow tame it, domesticate that data and have it available to you in real time, you can be a real strategic asset to the C-suite in your organization. And why not enable yourself to do that with your EOR as well? Sorry, my slides keep moving of their own volition. It's weird. Anyway, the next is select an EOR that's more than an EOR and historically effective in HCM globally. Another way of putting this is an organization that gets good at any number of the things that an EOR would do globally can evolve very intuitively and naturally into becoming an EOR. So that's something important to think about too. There are a lot of EORs out there that have been around for a long time, but they decided to go into business on the idea of being an EOR. And in my opinion, that's better than no EOR at all. But I think it's a lot better to be with a provider that has naturally evolved into becoming an EOR. And you think about payroll being a major component of EOR, probably the biggest part. If you have a provider that's already well versed in global payroll, and then you're ahead of the game. And this last one here, the third of the how can EORs be effective, is really an underscoring of the previous two. Select an EOR that can protect the employee experience. Imagine trying to protect the employee experience as an EOR yourself for your clients if you're dealing with just a hodgepodge of a slew of different technologies behind the curtain. The EOR's primary directive is to mitigate risk for clients, right? You want simplicity, elegant simplicity when you're trying to handle risk yourself. And so in my opinion, if you have a lot of variables that you're dealing with yourself as an EOR, providing that service, that's going to have sort of, I would say, a dampening effect on your ability to mitigate risk for your clients. And you think about risk, any kind of a risk event any kind of an event that happens, like a non-compliance event or something else related to the employment of people, that's going to immediately have an effect on the employee's impression of the organization. So it has a precipitously cascading effect on everything. And before you know it, you've squandered an employer brand that you've tried to build over many, many years' time, and you can't just switch that back on.